Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Kath and Mikey reporting in on Kath and Mikey Make podcast episode. Don't interrupt me. Episode 20, and we're not doing Iron Fist because we could not watch it.
We could still do it technically.
Yeah.
I already took enough notes, but I guess I would have to refresh the rest.
It's just that I literally ended episode 19 by going, Iron Fist, that's my favorite show, and then it ends. Yeah, so anyways, we're going to have to wait another 1,000 episodes to get back to that, I guess.
It's not that long, but it feels like... you meant our episodes.
Yeah,
I thought you meant Iron Fist, because it feels like it's 1,000 episodes.
Oh, man, it's brutal.
And I've only seen, 8.
It's as long as Midnight Mass, but terrible.
Yeah.
It's longer. We're talking about Midnight Mass.
Which we are excited about.
Mm-hmm.
Enough to make an episode.
I didn't know anything about it.
Me neither. It's a mini-series. It's created and directed by Mike Flanagan, which Netflix viewers might know from The Haunting of Hill House and The Haunting of Bly Manor, which is an anthology series. Very good, in my opinion, or at least entertaining. I've watched both during October Halloween season.
Yeah, you just watched Bly Manor. I've seen none of this guy's work except for this, and now I probably will go and watch his other things.
Yeah, I recommend it, and it's better not to go
Midnight
in
Mass,
not knowing
you mean?
a lot. Well, I definitely recommend Midnight Mass, but I also recommend The Hauntings.
Gotcha.
Both Hauntings. They're
Yeah.
pretty good. They're pretty. From the trailers, you will know they're both, and the name, they're both ghost stories, but they're very distinct. And as with Flanagan's work, I usually feel it's more about the human characters more than anything else. But then again, any good horror story, you're not in there for the monster. There's so many monster stories out there. But you're usually there because of the human characters.
Yeah.
And I think that's what really catch my interest in this story.
Usually, I feel like what good horror stuff has in common, they have a lot of things in common, but one of them is the monster being more of a manifestation of a psychological and emotional thing happening to a person or a group of people.
And definitely, and that's starting with more Victorian horror. We don't even have to go that back, but the type of horror that molded 20th century and 21st century horror stories. It's more about the society surrounding the monster rather than the monster itself. If you go to Dracula, it's about a count in a castle, but it's also about all the figurative ghost haunting Victorian society, the things we don't want, not the things, but the things the society wants you to hide about yourself, the skeletons in the closet.
Like Frankenstein, where this monster just wants to be loved and it's rejected by its creator and everyone who meets it solely based on the way it looks.
Yeah, science fiction is and the horror genre. It's more of a what's the word? A host or a carrier for
a surrogate.
Themes. Yeah, for those themes of love, rejection, regret, guilt.
Yeah.
Because usually the characters have ghosts. Everyone has ghosts that follow them around. They're just not the spooky kind. They are your memories.
Love, rejection, guilt, all things covered in Midnight Mass, I feel.
Yeah.
I like that you said those other haunting stories, they're ghost stories, but not typical, because spoilers from here on. This is an atypical vampire story.
Yes.
And I remember, I think it was by episode 3 where I texted you and I was like, vampires?
Yeah, I think I had already watched it. I was like, yeah.
Yeah, but they did it different than I've seen it done before, and it was excellent. Like, it felt classic vampire, but not so much so that it was like, oh, well, I know everything that's going to happen.
Yeah, and I think it was you that pointed it out that this is one of those stories, like zombie stories, where they don't mention zombies. Like the word
Yeah.
zombies isn't said anywhere.
They never say vampire.
Yeah.
Although I feel like, near the end, when the priest, the main priest, when he was losing faith in the whole conversion idea,
Yeah.
he should have, like, what's her name? The annoying
Bev?
Bev or Bev? Bev, yeah.
Beverly. Her whole name is Beverly.
She should have been in the middle of a speech and him just like, shut up.
Shut the
We're
fuck up.
obviously vampires. It's obvious.
It's obvious.
This is
in
not
the end
God's
of
work.
times. They don't give the monster a name. They only call him the angel. Or they
Yeah.
only call them
Even
the angel.
in the subtitles.
Yeah, it's like the angel screeches.
And it
The
kind of
angel
leads
makes
you
a
to
noise.
wonder, like, is he a biblical angel or is he just a creature that's taking advantage of the situation?
I think,
I think it's the latter.
yeah, I thought it was a very sentient and very smart creature
Yeah.
that is
To a point.
probably ages old,
Yeah.
that has seen it all. Like, where did he find this creature? It was, I think,
Jerusalem, right?
Yeah, he was in like the holy city. So it's probably
And
like
he was wandering in the
imagine it's like a
desert.
Mesopotamian creature, like very old.
Starving like crazy, trapped inside this structure that was uncovered by a storm.
Yeah, and in a way, you mentioned like when you said angel, and I thought like, well, it could probably like an Old Testament angel, like how they were actually described in some versions, where it's like, just like
3 heads.
3 heads and like
One
lion.
of which is a lion, yeah.
You can't even understand what they say.
I remember that line from Supernatural when like Dean makes fun of Zachariah's appearance because he's just like some schlubby middle-aged
Oh,
dude.
yeah.
And he's like, this? You haven't seen my true form where I have 3 heads, one of which is a lion.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's like
Supernatural, always alluding to like how scary the monsters actually are, but they
don't
always look
show
like normal fucking people.
yeah,
every
because
time.
you wouldn't get it.
You wouldn't get it. Also, this is what our budget allows. Shh. Okay, do you want to start with episode 1?
Yeah, so I guess before we start, and if you haven't watched it and you're still listening, well, I recommend you watch it, but you can just listen to us. We'll try. It's how many? 7 episodes. They're divided in books, so 7 books, and they make reference to the books in the Bible. So it's book 1, it's Genesis, then it's Psalms, Proverbs, Lamentations, Gospels, Act of the Apostles, and finally Revelation. Spooky. In episode 1, which is Genesis, accordingly, fitting. It's basically the setup of the story. You're in a small fishing village in God knows where. It's called Crockett Island. And I think we meet one of our main characters, which is Riley Flynn. Riley Flynn.
Yeah, it opens on him, which makes you think he's just like the central protagonist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Spoiler, he isn't. We get to know a little bit about him, but we the good thing about this is that it's a series, so there's a lot of exploration about the characters, what makes them tick and whatnot. You actually end up caring about these characters.
It's almost exclusively that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly. And this guy, well, he's from Crockett Island. He left to study college, become a financier, goes into startups. He's basically a finance bro in Chicago. Also a drunk, so he ends up killing someone in a
Yeah.
DUI.
He fell asleep on the wrong side of the road, I
Mhm.
guess, and it looked like she flew out the windshield.
Yeah.
And he was asleep with his body relaxed, so no problem. And they conveyed that information to you in a good way, I thought, where at
Mhm.
first I thought, oh, he was in an accident and like his wife or his girlfriend died or something.
Oh.
That's what I thought. And then you think he's just out of it, but you realize he's drunk.
Yeah.
And the paramedic or
No, yeah, it was the paramedic.
yeah, he's like shining a light in his eye, and he's like, it's always the drunk who like survive.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and then you realize that he goes to jail.
He's in 4 years in jail, so we see him when he gets out of jail. That's when the story starts, when he's coming back. And that's where we start meeting other characters like Erin Green. She seemed to be like a childhood sweetheart of Riley before she ran away at 15, and now she's back pregnant. She's an adult, so it's fine. But she came back to substitute her mom, the Mrs. Green Senior, as the town teacher, one would say, or one of the teachers at the local school. Yeah.
There really don't seem to be any other teachers.
No, except Bev. What does she teach? The only thing she can teach is hatred.
Bev is like Bev is like the principal, a teacher, like groundskeeper Willie. She does like every job. As long as she has access to poison, she's happy.
And keys. She just likes access to things.
Yeah.
And what is she? She's also like a caretaker for the church.
Yeah.
And it is suggested that she embezzled money from the church, and then to cover her tracks, she built this recreational center.
That still wasn't done.
It wasn't? It looked done, just looked cheap.
It did look cheap, but didn't she say it was like being finished or something like that?
Oh, I don't remember that.
Because nobody was using it. Why wasn't it being used?
Well, yeah, they were using. I think it's one of those, like it happens. I feel like it happens a lot here. Like, oh, this is a recreational center, or this is a park for you guys to use, but no one uses it, or it's always closed, or it's like, no, it's for special occasions.
And what was it for like Monsignor's medical bills? Was that where the money came from, or where was it? Like, what was the donation for?
It was just donated to the church.
Okay.
So the money, so near Crockett Island, like 3 years before the start of the story, and while Riley was in prison, there was an oil spill, and the company, I guess the petrol company, they were giving payouts to people so they wouldn't sue, like trying to settle. And it was Bev who convinced most of the townspeople, who are fishermen, to take the settlement. And while you're at it, why don't you donate to our church? And what Joe, who is officially the town drunk, what he's suggesting is that, or he says it outright. It's like, actually,
probably what nobody else dares to suggest.
Yeah, and we can talk about a bit later about what I think about his character. He says it outright. Like, yeah, she convinced townspeople, take the money, suggested them that they donate to the church, and all of them are devout churchgoers. And she just took the money, and from all that money, she did the rec center to cover it up.
And then did God knows what.
Yeah,
with the rest.
She was probably living at large. Who knows?
Yeah.
You couldn't tell because she has a shitty wardrobe. But
oh my God, she's terrible. She looks terrible.
She just looks terrible.
Can't stand her.
Like, you see, the other.
No offense to the actress, I'm sure she's very pretty.
I'm sure she's lovely.
Yeah.
But from the other characters, they start getting younger, which we could, yeah. They started like getting younger and they
Yeah.
keep getting better.
It was
and
really confusing. I was like, why the fuck are they
everyone's
wearing old makeup? Just cast old people, you weirdos. But as they progressively got younger, it was starting to make sense.
yeah.
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 I like you brought up the character Joe Colley, the town drunk,
Uh-huh.
and it makes me think something that I was continuously pleased by in this show, which I feel like it's sad that more stories don't do this. Every character interaction contains within it information that becomes relevant later. Like they use everything. Like when Joe Colley is having a conversation with what's the main guy's name?
Riley?
Riley. Yeah, when they're talking, it serves the purpose of my sister's dead, so I can't visit her anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And also Riley feeling a connection to Joe Colley.
Mm-hmm.
And it's completely natural. It feels like they're not setting up anything. It's just a sweet moment between these two guys.
Yeah.
And then later, because Riley cares about him, and because he heard the priest lie to him about going to see his sister,
Mm-hmm.
that is what causes Riley's downfall when he goes back to the church.
Mm-hmm.
The show is filled with
And at the same
interactions
time,
like that.
they show you that he's actually a good person. Without saying, like, you're such a good person.
Oh yeah,
Riley.
show don't tell.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
He could have gone to Aaron's house and just had a nice time
Mm-hmm.
with Aaron, but he wanted to know what happened to Joe Colley, the town drunk that nobody cares about.
Yeah. It's also in book 1, I forgot that we also get introduced to Monsignor Paul.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just know him as Father Paul. But it's not a big reveal. You kind of
Because,
start.
yeah, we saw it coming.
Yeah, we kind of saw it coming. It's that this Father Paul that comes to substitute Monsignor Pruitt, who was very old, very, very old. And actually, it's the reason why Bev got away with what she did, because he was barely there.
Yeah.
Like, at least
yeah,
mentally.
So true.
Yeah.
He wouldn't have allowed that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, he left for like a trip to the Holy Land, and all of a sudden, like a couple of, what time passes, and then this Father Paul comes here, like, oh yeah, I'm gonna substitute him. Yeah, he's fine. He's in the mainland.
Mm-hmm. He's recovering.
He's recovering. Yeah, he's great. And it turns out that, yeah, it's actually him, because he's a vampire now.
Not yet.
Not yet. When he comes
Been
in,
healed by the blood.
he can still see the daylight.
Yeah.
But he eventually kind of dies.
Yeah, that's one of the main differences, right? Of like this and traditional vampire lore as we know it, where the blood is healing people, but they're not immediately changed into vampires. Yeah. I think that's like actually they did that in Vampire Diaries maybe.
Yeah, no, but also in like, I remember like there's the idea of the sire.
Hang on, I can't believe I gave myself away that I watched Vampire Diaries. That's so embarrassing.
Well, I believe it was in Dracula when he sires one of the characters. He's technically not a full vampire. Like when they make someone, like a vampire's apprentice, let's say it that way.
Mm-hmm.
He's not a full-on vampire, but they kind of become like these grotesque creatures. They can't die. It's very difficult to kill them. But I don't remember which character it was in Dracula that he's like, he eats flies and shit to keep himself sustained. Yeah, it's like they're draining them of their blood.
How'd you feel about the way Monsignor told that story of how he got trapped in the desert and he was wandering and he found this angel?
Well, first I thought the reveal was too early, but after I saw the rest of the story, I get why they did the reveal early in air quotes. I think that episode is episode 3, if I'm not mistaken. He reveals his entire story. But I do like how they do it, which is through confession.
Yeah.
Forgive me for the lie I already told.
Mm.
I just like that scene. And
Yeah.
I like how he kept... but it also seems like he's in his head. Do you notice that at some points? Like, he wasn't, like, physically saying it. Because there's a point in that episode where he like, passes out. Because he's, like, becoming, like, a full vampire.
I think they were just flashing back. I think he was physically in confession.
Oh,
but I think
it could. But or maybe it's one of those things that happen and then it's in his memory. Because there's a point where he passes out and then he keeps telling the story. And then when they flash, when you realize that it's like someone flashing like a light in his eyes, it just like while he's in the confessional, it looks like a light opening from above. And he's like,
yeah.
Remember that part?
I do. So, yeah.
I thought it was right. Cool transition also.
Either it's just a clever transition or they're just intercutting between that and a flashback. I also like the images that it was showing of it, like really showed where
like
he was at in his head. Yeah, the carved images.
Oh yeah.
Because he saw this as like a really special moment, not just for him but for the world.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like he said, it was the end of the waterfall of death. Like, because in later episodes he tells a story about how
he was in Latin America.
And he was next to a waterfall, and he was like, must be what death seems like to God, because so many people are dying so constantly that it's just like a flood, and you can't hear anything.
Yeah, he can't even hear prayers or anything.
And so he thought that this was, like, this is it. This is going to change everything. And why wouldn't you? I also like when he looks up, you see the vampire starts to feed on him when, as an old man, he stumbles into this ancient ruin in the desert. The vampire begins to feed on him. He's scared, so he starts calling out to God.
Uh-huh.
And the vampire, I think, realizes that he's a priest. And so he stops feeding on him, and he gives him blood. Because the vampire sees this opportunity to take advantage of his position and get more followers and more food.
Yes.
Yeah, but when he comes to and sees the vampire, there's a light dimly shining behind his head that looks like a halo, and it's so well done.
Oh yeah, which can also be in his own, like what he's seen in his mind, in his delusional mind. It's having his own little DMT dream. We can never know about the intentions of the creature, and I like it that way. It's the creature doesn't really talk, it just makes noises. We really only see it towards the end, and it's scary as fuck.
And like we said at the beginning, it's not about the creature.
No, it's not about the creature.
It is scary, yeah.
Yeah, but they could have ruined it at the end where it starts
yeah.
talking. It could have been like that.
That would have been so embarrassing. The one time where it could have talked, where the priest was like, "Where have you been? I've been calling out to you." It just lifts the finger.
Oh yeah.
Like shh. Which was perfect.
Yeah.
I love its entrance into the church. When they gather everyone in the church, and there's just this fucking ghoul in this church robe, and everyone's like, "Oh God!"
In the what's that called? Oh God, it has a name. It's not a church gear. It's like a Chaucer, something like that. It has a name.
Beats the heck out of me.
Heathen. Anyway. Yeah, and I also like his the introduction that there's something in the island and you don't know what it is. Like
Yeah.
you get Uker and what's his name, Warren, which is Riley's brother, and Ali, where they
Which-
go to the island and then someone flashes a light and it's like you see it all of a sudden.
Yeah. You
In between like the eyes of the cats that are watching.
you get so many jump scares from it
Yeah.
throughout the show, but they only sprinkle it in. It never really full on shows up until the end.
Mm-hmm. And like people talking about an albatross flying around. Like Joe, he sees an albatross, and like Uker also sees an albatross, or like a heron. He calls it a heron. Like the cats that are at the beach
Because it's
with no blood.
too dark to tell what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a wingspan. And the Riley, he thinks he sees the Monsignor walking around in his hat and cape. I suspect that was also the creature.
Yeah, no,
'Cause
it
he
was. It
wears-
was confirmed.
Yeah. Oh yeah, because we later see him wearing a hat.
He looks so creepy like that. With
Yeah,
the
because he's
hat
like a
and-
very like long-legged. It looked like a very tall man
Yeah.
with the hat, at least.
There's something like there's a little Jeepers Creepers vibe to
Mhm.
him, right? I didn't
Oh,
I
yeah.
didn't really watch those, but that's what it looks like basically. But I also like when vampire stories have the progenitor vampire as like this Nosferatu type vampire.
Yeah.
And the rest are just like, normal vampires. It makes me think like this one has been around so long that its human form has just like completely dissolved.
Yeah. They do that in switch into comedy. They do that in What We Do in the Shadows.
Oh, right. Yeah, yeah.
In the show.
You told me about that.
Yeah. Watch it.
I know, I will. Yeah.
I like how the rest of the story evolves. How Bev keeps she is completely convinced that this is the end of times and they are the chosen people who will live in the darkness, and like how the way she keeps quoting verses from Revelations
To
and
justify
like
her actions.
yeah, and like the angel of the Lord and like the different.
And she has this shit-eating face where she expects you to be like really impressed that she just recited from the Bible word for word whatever verse.
Yeah,
And everybody's like over it. Everybody's rolling their eyes at her.
like I don't there's even a part where I think it was what's his name, the guy that takes care of the ports and also kind of like a groundskeeper. She's like, oh right, like I don't remember exactly the context, but Sturch, she's like, oh right, Sturch, like for him to back her up.
Yeah.
And he starts like trying to quote the Bible too, but it looks clearly that it's a verse that she told him to say and he can't remember it.
yeah.
And she's like, "Shut the fuck up." And like keeps citing the verse herself. It's a whole series, so there's so many themes that they keep up, and like with every different character there's like something else to talk about.
But
I for instance, the sheriff, his backstory is that he had to leave. I think it was the NYPD because they were being racist against him. They treat him like a terrorist. The doctor story, which ends up being connected with Monsignor Pruitt.
where she can't leave the island because she's taking care of her mother and she doesn't want her mother to die in an unfamiliar place.
Yeah.
Tragic.
Tragic because I think it's during the potluck episode where she's like, oh, after she dies, I'm leaving.
Yeah.
And it doesn't happen.
First, her mother becomes immortal,
And
then
second,
she dies.
they all die.
Yeah. Her mother dies after her.
Yeah, that is kind of sad.
What do you think of the way they built him and Aaron's relationship?
I loved it
I loved it.
so much. I mean, in the end, there was, I wouldn't say there was a romance, but there was an element that was more than platonic, definitely.
It was
Especially,
romantic. It was romantic.
but not in the typical sense. Like they didn't need to show them like
Kissing or
kissing or
having a
making
sex
out or
scene,
having
that's
sex. Like,
why I love it. That's exactly
yeah,
why.
it was just they were high school sweethearts, and now they reconnected, and it was most of it was just talking,
Hmm.
talking it out.
Even at the beginning, you can tell they have their own shit to deal with,
Mm-hmm.
but they're comfortable with each other from the beginning.
Yeah.
And it progresses very naturally. They have what I feel like are very well written, natural conversations.
Yes.
Sometimes there's like a little bit of you're repeating yourself. Maybe this one's going on a little long, but
Uh-huh.
it always brought it back to where it was satisfying enough that I wasn't mad that they put me through all those words.
Yeah, and sometimes you think it's like a bit of a tangent, but it does have a lot to do with the themes of the story. There is, there's an episode. I think it might be like around episode 3 also, where they have like this whole conversation about what happens after death.
Yep,
That was amazing.
it was great.
It was great.
First, I thought they were going to fight because she seemed like she had just lost her baby. And she was like, "You must think I'm ridiculous praying and because of my faith." And he was like, "No, I understand it." And then she goes and asks
Like, what do
him
you think happens? And he goes into this whole
when you
explanation.
die.
Yeah,
Yeah.
about how just your bodily functions shut down. Eventually, your brain dies. But there's like the the thing about the DMT dream, like the dream of all dreams, like fireworks. And then she goes on into like her own ideas of what happens and what heaven is for her, and like where her daughter would be, how her daughter wasn't sent here to suffer. That's why she died.
She said something so sweet about her daughter, and it was that God sent her here to sleep,
Sleep, yeah,
just to sleep. Yeah.
yeah, and
That's
yeah,
a-
it's
around where I started getting choked up.
Yeah, I was
because
like,
it was just such a kind idea.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Good acting. Honestly.
Really good acting on
Surprisingly good acting.
both sides, you know.
And yeah, but that conversation about death really ties in on the reason why it all started in the first place and how the story ends.
Yeah.
Which is because Pruitt was terrified of death and of the people that he loved dying, which in this case was Sarah's mom.
I wanted to talk about performances too, because I don't know who this actor is, as in I've never seen him in other stuff, but the guy who plays Monsignor Pruitt is excellent.
I think I've seen him in other stuff, definitely. I just have to remember where I've seen him.
He's so charming and so seemingly wise and and deadpan in a way that's not uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, when he starts not believing, Jesus Christ, sorry about the construction. When he starts not believing in his own bullshit, he's less charismatic and he's less, you just buy it less.
Yeah.
Which is so perfect. It's so subtle because he's saying it with just as much force, but he doesn't believe in what he's saying, and you feel that. I also want to say it blew my mind. You were sitting next to me when I realized it.
What?
That the doctor is his daughter.
Oh.
It just... And again, just a little scene with Joe Colley entering Monsignor's house. He was looking at the picture of young Pruitt, and he was like, you look just like him. You could be his son.
A dead ringer, he calls him.
Yeah.
Yikes.
And he says, I heard that he might not have been celibate.
Yeah, and then it connects it with later on when they're talking.
How he'd been bringing the communion to the doctor's mom, Sarah, right?
Uh-huh.
And you think it's just because he's nice to everybody in this show.
Yeah.
He brings it to her every day, and when she's like well enough to realize that it's him, he's like, I have so much to tell you. And it's like, oh, they're friends. But it doesn't connect until he's sitting there with her like, yeah, so we had a kid. I wish things had worked out better.
Beep, beep, beep. It was also telling, but the thing is that she explains it off because during the potluck, when it's Ash Wednesday, and she brings a date, and she's talking to her date, and like she looks off to, which is the date is a woman, and she looks off to the distance, and he's standing there like just looking at her, and he's like, oh, that's the same look I would get from Monsignor Pruitt, because she doesn't know.
Oh, you blew my mind again.
Yeah, so she thought it was like, oh, because he knows I'm a lesbian, so he stares at me that way, and that's why I don't go back to church anymore, because they don't accept me. But it's really because he's like, he's not staring with hatred, he's staring with longing and love.
Yeah.
And that's why he tells her, like, I'm so proud of you. And, you know,
that was
like, later
great
on.
At the end, when she's about to burn down the church. And
he says it again, but before that, it's, I think in that, there's an
interaction where he's like, you heal people, and even though you don't come to church, like you're a good, valued member of this community, and we care about you. This devil, which he thinks is an angel, is promising him the ability to have a second chance at life, to basically erase all the mistakes that you made. And live the life you always wanted to live forever.
Yeah, and
it's that temptation that destroys the entire town.
Yeah, it not only temptation, even like the deadly sense, like Bev releases them into the rest of the townsfolk who weren't in church and who are not devout, and they're just consumed with like everything. Well, literally consuming, the gluttony, the wrath, all of it, just like and they don't even know what they're doing. They're just blinded completely by the hunger.
Yeah.
And towards the end, like I don't remember Uker, he turns to Sturge and he's like, this is at the very end where they burn everything down, and the only place they had to go to, they end up burning it down too, so they're gonna die. Uker turns to Sturge and he's like, I think I ate my mom.
Yeah, and
the whole idea of neighbor turning against neighbor, how so easy. I thought about that, how so easily humans turn against each other. I remember this, not related, but actually a real story. It's a book called Ordinary Men. It's about in World War II, how in France neighbors turn against their Jewish neighbors, even without, it was the German occupation by the Nazis in France, and they were like, well, if you know anyone that's Jewish, and people just went out to into their neighbors' houses and took them out and brought them into the town square, like, they're the Jews, they're all here, just so they would save their own skins. Yeah, and it's called Ordinary Men because it was ordinary men who did this. It wasn't the Nazis, or it wasn't some evil force doing this. It was the evil of men, I guess.
And what were Nazis before they were Nazis?
Ordinary men.
Ordinary men.
Yeah. But and so I thought about that. It's just, in this context, it's more about, it's a bit different. Obviously, it's a monster story, but it's what were these people? They were just not churchgoers. That's why Bev led these monsters out, these wolves, how Monsignor Pruitt ends up calling them. He's like, we're not the sheep, we're the wolves.
Look, we're the wolves. Yeah. And as they're approaching the church after
you see
their feed,
you see like their
glowing eyes. It looks like a legion of shadow demons.
It looked like Night of the Living Dead, kind of.
It was just something obviously not from heaven.
Yeah, it was.
It was
Those
obvious.
were not sheep.
I want to talk about Riley's death for a second,
Oh yeah.
and just how solid that scene was.
Oh, that entire scene.
Yeah, where
Amazing.
he tells her the whole story about how he got turned into a vampire.
I think that's the episode. It's him telling that story.
That's what I'm saying.
Right? Yeah, I was trying to remember.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
she's on the boat and she's like, "Why are you telling me all this? Just to scare me? Take me out in the middle of nowhere?" And he's like, "No, it's so I would have nowhere to go."
Mm-hmm.
Because he doesn't want to hurt anybody. He's like a good guy
Actually,
up
good.
until the end.
Uh-huh.
And
He doesn't feed.
no, as soon as the sun comes up, he opens his eyes and there's the girl that he killed in the drunk
He
driving
has the
accident.
the dream of all dreams.
Dream to end all dreams, as
Uh-huh.
he put it when they were talking about death.
Yeah.
And she's like, "Hey, dude, here we are."
Well, I mean, I think she just extends her hand. And
Yeah,
he
she
grabs
extends her hand like it's okay,
Uh-huh.
which is, that's a heavy thing
Uh-huh.
for someone whose life you took away, to be like it's okay. But I feel like it ties back to the thing at the end where it's like this is where we all end up, and like our individuality goes away and we become one again.
Oh, like what Aaron
It
is.
talks about.
Yeah, this is a
she
story where
dies.
everyone dies.
Yeah.
But we get a treat at the end, and we see, let's just say, Aaron's own DMT dream.
And her explanation of it kind of makes it like a horror story where nobody gets out, but that you don't feel bad about.
Yeah, it's better that they just don't.
But back to Riley's death, I like that he has that dream, and then it just hard cuts to Aaron screaming.
Just like, yeah, it's horrible.
It's horrible.
Another detail, there are so many details in this story that I enjoy. I love Bev's demise, just like her, just like trying to dig through the sand to hide from the sun, and she's just terrified. It's what she deserves.
Oh my god, that was the best.
Yeah.
She's just like a
Mwah.
cowardly dog, just like digging into the sand.
Yeah.
Has nowhere to go. She looked for a split second, like, I'm going to accept this with grace. It's like, no, the fuck you are. You haven't earned that grace.
And the
in
thing is,
any
like, right
way.
next to her, it's like the people she like stomp on, like the only two Muslims in the town.
Yeah.
And so I like that. I also liked. I was kind of bittersweet, like all the town folks when they realized like they, this is it. This is the end. How they start singing a church hymn.
Oh yeah.
And then when the sun comes up, it like abruptly stops.
Yeah.
It's yeah, it was, and at the end, that we see the creature, the angel, like flying away, because while it's an interesting creature. He when he's feeding, no self-preservation whatsoever. Like you could shoot him and set him on fire, and he would not care.
He doesn't give a shit until you set him on fire.
Yeah, that's when he runs away. But while he's feeding on Aaron, that's how she dies. She starts like she has like two knives that she grabbed earlier in the story, and she starts like making the holes in his wings.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's very difficult for him to fly now. And only two people escape, and they're both teenagers. It's Lisa and Warren, who's Riley's
Our new
brother.
Adam and Eve.
Oh, Genesis again. Well, yeah, I could see that.
After the apocalypse.
I mean, after the apocalypse, it's supposed to be. Actually, no, it's the end of times. But ideally, in other.
Bro, what do you know about God?
Shut
God
up.
Stuff.
But in other, how in other myths, how it ends and it starts again. Anyway.
Yeah.
They see the creature flying off. It's like, and they're like, oh, he's trying to escape, like the sunlight. And I think Lisa comments on like one of them comments like he's not gonna make it.
Yeah.
Like 30 miles. And you're not sure until the very end when Lisa says, I can't feel my legs.
Mm-hmm.
So I took that as that the vampire is dead or
Yeah.
the angel died, because at least according to some of the vampiric lore, uh, I mean, if you're a full-on vampire, if the one who created you dies, you also die.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I kind of bit saw this.
You're probably right. Yeah.
I might be wrong. I might be right.
I like that, the vampires got to die on their own terms without the boss vampire dying and making them all be dead
Oh yeah, by dying.
just by default. This is one of those shows where the writing style is like everybody will answer your question with a long story.
Oh yeah.
They're like, hey, what's your birthday? And they're like, did I ever tell you about my mother's strawberry patch? You see, every birthday my mother would pick strawberries, and then they just tell a forever story. And the person just sits there and fucking takes it. Just nodding.
I think you were like, oh, that's why nothing gets done in this town. Everyone's always talking.
Yeah. Well, the one time...
That happened with Rahul Kohli's character.
Exactly. That's the time that it bothered me. When the doctor was like, hey, I think something really bad is going to go down in the church. Could you investigate? And he's like, do you know why I quit and came to this town?
All to say, like, if I investigate, I'm going to get lynched, lady.
He just could have said that. Not that his story was uninteresting. It was just the wrong way to tell it.
Probably. I think... I mean, there are hints about his character, but I feel like those hints could have been spread out better.
Exactly.
The same as they did with, like, Riley or Aaron.
He was like the one character that the show would just forget about for a while, and then he would just show back up again.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
A little.
Everybody felt much more integrated into the story, which I guess fits into the idea that he's an outsider. But
yeah,
I don't think,
or that
they
he's
did
like
that
the
on
cop,
purpose.
like he's just investigating around. But they could have done it. I guess they tried that a little, but it didn't work out as well as with other stories I've seen, where part of the story is just the cop, sheriff, whatever character just investigating, and you learn things about the story through the investigation.
Yeah.
So that could have been done a little bit better, but it always felt like he wasn't learning really anything from his investigation. It was just like a big mess.
True.
Like he was always kept in the dark in many ways until the not the end, but until it's time for the showdown.
Yeah. Which he doesn't survive. I thought,
I mean,
we touched on it for a second. But the way he asked his son to sit down and pray with him earlier, and his son was like, no, I'm gonna go to church, and how much it meant to him because his wife was Muslim and she died, and like he wanted to share that with the last piece he has left of her, his son, and he's just like, no, fuck you, Dad, I'm a teenager.
I'm a teenager, I'm gonna be Christian now, because that's what teenagers do nowadays. After
the regret, when he goes when he goes with his dad on the beach, they're both dying and they just start praying together.
Oh yeah, like
so touching.
One last salah. That was very nice. And that's because his son is a vampire already, and because he drank the Kool-Aid, and he is mortally wounded, so they're both gonna die.
Get shot in the stomach.
Shot in the gut.
By Bev?
Fucking Bev.
Fucking Bev, dude.
Fucking Bev.
What a piece of shit.
I did think it was a bit funny. I was like, oh, so this is how the parents of born-again Christians feel when they go off to college, and instead of doing drugs, they become Catholics. It's like,
where did I go wrong?
I thought I taught you well.
Oh, whoops. Did I leave a gram of weed in your lunchbox? Didn't mean to do that. I hope God doesn't get mad at you.
Oh.
Dad, the fuck? Okay, do you want to close on Aaron's speech?
The last one?
Yeah. I know.
I cried so much.
I cried too.
I don't know. I
Horror
like,
things rarely make me cry. Rarely.
but well, Mike Flanagan shit makes me cry.
Apparently.
I like the idea. He does it. I guess it's like a recurring concept for him in his, you know,
In his stories.
in his stories. Like the idea of how you have one last dream, and in Erin's case, her last dream is just like a memory. Like she goes back to that conversation
And
she had
gets
with
to
Riley.
exist within the memory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like this whole thing of like what are dreams, and it reminded me a little because she says like the
We're the universe dreaming about
we're the
itself.
universe or the cosmos. I think she uses we're the cosmos dreaming about itself, and like how she talks about this like the final fireworks, as her body is dying, like just one last firework and her neurons going about. I don't know. It reminded me of it's the Spanish author. His name is Pedro Calderón de la Barca. His most famous, let's just say his most famous book is Life is but a Dream. Life is a Dream, named after a famous monologue in the story that ends with "Life is a dream and dreams are dreams." Something like that. I thought about that, and in that case, it's a guy that he gets in a scene. He gets like, let's just say he gets roofied, and from the misery he lives, they take him to a palace for him to live out how he's supposed to actually live. And because he's under the influence, he like treats everyone like shit, and he behaves like this like pompous ass. He is not necessarily like that in real life. We do know that he is supposed to be a prince, but he has, since he's been a kid, he's been living in a tower, so he doesn't know who he is really. But because he behaves in this way, and when he wakes up again, he's back in his poverty and his misery in this tower in prison. He's like, am I that person that's in the dream? Are we the people we dream we are, or what are we if not a dream, if not the people we think we are in dreams? It's like a trip. I don't know if this is what you were looking for, but that's what I was thinking when she was talking about.
That's interesting. I don't entirely follow. Maybe because
yeah, you look like you don't follow.
I mean, I told you it kind of made me think of that Jack Kerouac book where he's talking about this character he dreams up in a weird waking up state. He thinks of this hunchback character named Mobe, and he's like, Mobe is just as real as me. We're both part of the same ephemeral dream. But mostly, I find it interesting that it's a horror property that's choosing to acknowledge death and our place in the universe in a different way, because in every horror thing we see, death is just something to be feared. And here is Erin telling you, I thought I would be terrified, but I'm just too busy remembering that there's no me, there's no self. She was saying that's the problem with, us saying, well, when I die for myself, it's like, no, you're going back to what everything is. You were made in the stars, and she's like completely relaxed about dying, and it makes that church hymn into the sun coming up all the more beautiful and affecting.
I don't know if you remember when Riley, I guess he decided that he was going to end it, rather than stay like this as a vampire, he leaves letters for his loved ones. But among those letters is one that's addressed to Pruitt himself. And when when the Monsignor opens it, it says, from dust, no, it's from dust we came, and into dust we will return.
Ash.
It was something about dust or ash, and it's the same concept. Like you too will die.
Exactly. Yeah, and that shows, and Erin explicitly states that the totality of everything, that thing which you actually are, that is God. That's what we talk about when we say God. And at the end, you see the one who gets that the least is Bev. The one with the least faith is Bev.
Yeah.
Right? The
Oh,
one who's
yeah.
always trying to show how she's
I
God's
guess in
little
God's
favorite.
hands. Yeah, and I think it was Riley's mom that before, like at some point, well, among the Kea, she's like, you just hate that God loves us the same as she loves you. He
Yeah.
loves you.
Everybody equally.
Yeah.
Why does that bother you so much?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Which, is beautiful, which tells me that even if she couldn't articulate it as well as Erin did in her final moments, it's like even she understands that on some basic level. Even she has faith that she's going to be in the arms of God when she dies,
Yeah. Poser.
Poser.
Not a true fan.
I feel bad. You went through the effort of explaining that poem, and I just didn't understand it.
I can read it to you. It's a whole monologue, so I wouldn't want.
We can just
You can cut it out,
we
but
can just close off with you reading it to me.
I'll read it in English, even though I know it by heart in Spanish. Segismundo's monologue. That's how it's known. It goes, we live while we see the sun, where life and dreams are as one. And living has taught me this. Man dreams the life that is his, until his living is done. The king dreams he is king, and he lives in the deceit of a king, commanding and governing. And all the praise he receives is written in wind and leaves. A little dust on the way when death ends all with a breath, where then is the gain of a throne that shall perish and not be known in the other dream that is death. Dreams the rich man of riches and fears, the fears that his riches breed. The poor man dreams of his need and all his sorrow and tears. Dreams he that prospers with years. Dreams he that feigns and forgoes. Dreams he that rails on his foes. And in all the world I see, man dreams whatever he be, and his own dream no man knows. And I too dream, and behold, I dream I am bound with chains, and I dream that these present pains were fortunate ways of old. What is life? A tale that is told. What is life? A frenzy extreme, a shadow of things that seem, and the greatest good is but small, that all life is a dream to all, and that dreams themselves are a dream. That's it.
That's it. Until next time.
Until next time.